The maid helped a homeless man with soup. The millionaire returned to expose who tried to silence her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Emma had always worked hard. As a maid at a small restaurant, she found herself running from one task to the next, always on the move, but never really feeling like she was getting ahead. One chilly winter evening, after a long day of cleaning and serving, Emma noticed an elderly man sitting alone by the door of the restaurant. His clothes were ragged, his face weathered by time, and his eyes, they were full of pain. He seemed lost, the kind of lost you don't come back from. As Emma passed him on her way to clear a nearby table, she noticed how he shivered in the cold, despite the heater running inside. She paused, hesitating for a moment. The man looked up at her, his eyes pleading, and for some reason, she felt an overwhelming urge to help him. "Excuse me, ma'am, could you spare $1? I haven't eaten all day," he muttered, his voice rough. Emma had only a few dollars left in her pocket, enough for a cup of coffee for herself after her shift. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She looked at the man again, his eyes filled with sincerity, and something in her told her she had to do something. Without thinking, Emma walked back to the kitchen and returned with a bowl of hot soup. "This is all I can offer right now, but I hope it helps," she said softly, handing it to him. The man looked at her, his eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you, young lady," he whispered, his hands trembling as he accepted the soup. "I promise I'll pay you back." She smiled, though she didn't expect anything in return. After all, she wasn't helping him for a favor, just because it felt right. That night, Emma went home exhausted but feeling strangely fulfilled. She didn't know why, but she had the feeling that helping that man would change something for her, even if it was just a small spark of hope in a life that often felt dull. The next day, as she was working her shift, Emma heard the restaurant door chime. She turned, expecting to see a customer, but what she didn't expect was the same man, now dressed in a sharp suit and a designer coat, walking in like he owned the place. He walked straight up to her, and for a moment, Emma froze. He smiled at her with a warmth that didn't match the coldness of his suit. "You don't recognize me, do you?" he asked softly. Emma blinked, still stunned. I don't think so," she replied, her voice hesitant. "I'm David Carter," he said, offering his hand. "I'm the CEO of Carter Enterprises." Emma's jaw dropped. "Wait, you're not?" she stammered, but he waved her off with a chuckle. "I'm not what you thought. I'm not homeless, Emma, but I wanted to thank you for the soup. It meant more to me than you'll ever know." Emma was speechless. I thought you were just someone down on their luck." David nodded, his expression serious. "I've been where you are, feeling like no one cares. But I saw something in you that I haven't seen in a long time. Kindness, without expectation. And I want to repay you for that." Emma was still processing when he continued. "I've decided to make sure you get the help you need. I'll take care of your bills, and I want you to come work with me. You have potential, Emma. I see something in you." Emma's heart raced. This was unbelievable. She hadn't expected anything, but here she was, faced with an opportunity she could never have imagined. As she looked into David's eyes, she knew this wasn't just about the soup anymore. It was about her life changing in a way she couldn't yet understand. As the days passed, Emma found herself unable to shake the memory of David Carter. His sudden appearance, his kindness, and the unexpected offer to help her. It was all so surreal. She went about her days at the restaurant, her thoughts constantly drifting back to that moment. David had promised to take care of her bills, and even offered her a job at his company. It was a life-changing offer, but she wasn't sure if she could truly accept it. Could she trust someone who had been so mysterious? Could she accept help from a man she had once thought was just another homeless stranger? Every time she thought about it, a mix of excitement and hesitation washed over her. She had never had anyone offer her so much before. It felt like a dream, yet here she was, standing at the crossroads of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. The next morning, Emma received a message from David. It was simple, yet it sent her heart racing. "Let's meet at the office today at 3 p.m. I'd like to talk to you about your future with Carter Enterprises." She stared at the message for a moment before quickly typing a response. "I'll be there." As the clock ticked closer to 3 p.m., Emma could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. This wasn't just about a job. It was about changing the course of her life. She dressed carefully that afternoon, her hands trembling as she slipped into her best clothes. A simple but clean dress. She had never felt more out of place than she did walking through the grand doors of Carter Enterprises. The polished marble floors, the tall glass windows, and the perfectly manicured plants all seemed so foreign to her. She felt like a small fish in an ocean full of sharks. The receptionist, a woman with a warm smile, greeted her and escorted her to an elevator. "Mr. Carter is expecting you," she said politely. Emma nodded, trying to steady her nerves. When the elevator doors opened, she was led down a long hallway, past sleek offices and meeting rooms. Finally, she arrived at David's office. He was standing by the window, looking out over the city skyline. He turned when he heard her footsteps, his expression softening. "Emma, I'm glad you came," he said, his voice warm. "Please, have a seat." Emma sat down across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice uncertain. "I'm just not sure if I can accept all of this. It feels too good to be true." David studied her for a moment before speaking. "I understand how you feel, but I want you to know that this is real. I've seen the potential in you, Emma. You're hardworking, dedicated, and kind. Those qualities are rare in the world I come from. I want to offer you an opportunity to join my team, to help make a difference, not just for the company, but for yourself too." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. She had always dreamed of a better life, of a chance to make something of herself. But was she ready to take this leap? "But why me?" she asked softly. "Why offer all of this to someone like me?" David leaned forward, his eyes sincere. "Because you showed me something that no amount of money or power can buy. Compassion. That's something I don't see much of in my world. And I believe that's what the world needs more of. You have the chance to be a part of that change." Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed by her emotions. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. David smiled, his gaze soft. "You don't have to say anything, Emma. Just know that this is your chance. The decision is yours." Emma sat in silence, the enormity of the moment settling over her. She had spent so many years struggling to survive, to make ends meet, but now she had a chance at something better, something real. She looked up at David, her heart full of gratitude and hope. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll take the job." David's smile widened. "Good. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do. And remember, this isn't just about work. It's about building something together. Something meaningful." Emma nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. A path that would lead her to a brighter future. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something more than she had ever dreamed of. Emma settled into her new role at Carter Enterprises with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Her first few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, introductions, and new responsibilities. David had kept his promise. He had enrolled her in training programs, assigned her projects that challenged her, and supported her every step of the way. But despite the progress, Emma still felt like an outsider in the world of business elites. She was used to working in a restaurant, surrounded by people she could relate to, but now she found herself surrounded by successful professionals in a polished corporate environment. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the self-doubt crept back in. She questioned if she truly belonged here. As the days went by, Emma found solace in her quiet moments. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, she found herself alone in a corner of the office, sipping her coffee and staring out at the city skyline. It was then that David walked in, his usual confident stride softened by a hint of weariness. "How's everything going?" he asked, his voice warm and genuine. "It's a lot," Emma admitted with a small laugh. "But I'm getting there." David nodded, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. "I know it's a big change, but you're doing great. You have something here that most people don't, your heart. That's what matters." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of comfort in his words. She had never thought of herself as someone special, but maybe David was right. Maybe it was time to start believing in herself. Over the next few weeks, Emma's confidence grew. She started leading her own projects, contributing ideas in meetings, and even made a few key decisions that impressed her colleagues. The work wasn't easy, but it was fulfilling. She felt like she was finally making a difference. But there was still a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't until one evening, when she found herself at a company gala, that she realized what it was. The gala was everything she had imagined. Elegant, lavish, and full of influential people. Emma had never felt more out of place. She stood in the corner, holding a glass of wine, watching as the rich and powerful mingled around her. That was when she spotted David across the room. He was talking to a group of people, but his eyes kept drifting toward her. When their gazes met, he excused himself from the conversation and made his way over to her. "Emma," he said with a smile, "I'm glad you made it." She smiled back, though she couldn't hide her nervousness. "This is all a bit overwhelming," she confessed. David chuckled. "I understand. It's a lot to take in." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. It was as if everything else had melted away, and it was just the two of them in that moment. "You look beautiful," David said softly. Emma felt a blush creep up her neck. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As the night wore on, Emma found herself drawn to David more than ever. His kindness, his support, and the way he made her feel seen. It was all too much to ignore. She realized then that her feelings for him had grown in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. There was something deeper, something more real. As the evening came to a close, David took her hand gently. "Emma," he began, his voice sincere, "I know we've both been through a lot to get here. But I want you to know that you're not alone. You've got me, and you've got this company. We'll face everything together." Emma's heart fluttered in her chest. She had come so far in such a short time, and now, standing beside David, she realized that she had found something more than just a job. She had found a new beginning, a place where she belonged, and maybe even, just maybe, someone who cared for her in a way she never thought possible. As the weeks passed, Emma began to settle into her new life at Carter Enterprises. The overwhelming feelings of self-doubt she had once carried slowly faded as she grew more confident in her role. Her colleagues were beginning to see her as more than just the maid who had stumbled into the world of high society. She was becoming an integral part of the team. But with this new sense of belonging came a nagging feeling, an undercurrent of tension that she couldn't shake. It was as though the higher she rose in her career, the further away she felt from the life she had once known. It wasn't just the corporate world that felt unfamiliar. It was her relationship with David. Although he had been supportive and kind, Emma couldn't help but feel a little distant from him at times. They spent more time together, but each encounter felt like it was happening in two separate worlds. David, the CEO, and Emma, the woman who had once served him soup without knowing his true identity. She still remembered that night at the gala when she had realized her feelings for him were deeper than just gratitude. But as the days went on, she began to wonder if David felt the same. It wasn't that he had been cold or indifferent. In fact, he had been more attentive than ever. But there was something about him, something he wasn't sharing, that made Emma feel like she was always just a step behind. One afternoon, while Emma was working on a report in her office, David walked in with a serious look on his face. "We need to talk," he said, his tone more businesslike than usual. Emma looked up, her heart skipping a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, but she wasn't sure if she was ready. "Of course," she replied, setting her pen down. David took a seat across from her, his gaze intense. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his voice low. Emma's pulse quickened, and she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been keeping something from you," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "And it's time I told you the truth." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Was he about to confess something? Something that could change everything? She waited, holding her breath, as David continued. "I've known from the beginning that we come from two very different worlds," he said. "And I've tried to keep things professional, but the truth is, I don't want to hide behind this facade anymore. I want you to know who I really am." Emma's confusion deepened. What was he talking about? "What do you mean?" she asked softly. David paused, then stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "I'm not just the CEO of Carter Enterprises," he said quietly. "I'm also a man who's been hiding his feelings for you. I've been avoiding this for a long time, but I can't keep pretending." Emma stared at him, her mind racing. Was this really happening? Was David confessing his feelings for her? He turned back to face her, his eyes softening. I care about you, Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I've been fighting it, but I can't anymore. I've never met anyone like you. The room fell silent. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She had never expected this, never imagined that David felt the same way. But here he was, confessing his feelings, his vulnerability laid bare before her. She stood up, her hands trembling. David, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. He took a step closer to her, his expression earnest. You don't have to say anything, he replied softly. I just needed you to know. Emma's mind was in a whirlwind, but one thing was clear. She felt the same. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, but with David, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. As they stood there, the weight of everything they had been through settled between them, and in that moment, everything changed. No longer just an employee, no longer just a woman who had helped a stranger. Emma was something more. And so was David. Together, they were starting something new, something real. A new chapter in both of their lives had begun, one that they would face together. As days turned into weeks, Emma began to find her footing in this new world. The initial awkwardness of stepping into Carter Enterprises had faded, replaced with a growing confidence that she hadn't felt in years. David's words, his support, and the trust he had placed in her continued to echo in her mind. She was no longer just a maid, no longer just a woman who had once offered soup to a stranger. She was someone who had a purpose, someone who could make a difference. But even as Emma started to thrive at work, she couldn't help but feel the strain of the emotional journey she was on. Her relationship with David had evolved in ways she hadn't anticipated. There were moments of undeniable closeness, but also moments of uncertainty. As their bond deepened, Emma began to wrestle with a new set of fears. She had never been a part of this world, David's world. She had never been surrounded by wealth, power, and the polished, high-end atmosphere of the business elite. At times, she felt like an imposter, a small-town girl who had somehow stumbled into the life of a billionaire. David, on the other hand, seemed to take it all in stride. He had been living in this world for years, and yet, when he looked at her, she could see the sincerity in his eyes. It made her question everything. Did he see her as she was, or did he see some version of her that he wanted to believe in? Was she just a symbol of something he had been searching for, someone who wasn't caught up in the world of business and wealth, someone who didn't care about his money? It wasn't just David's success that Emma struggled with. It was her own self-worth. She had worked so hard for so long, but now that she had the opportunity to have everything she had dreamed of, she didn't know if she was ready for it. What if she wasn't enough? One evening, after another long day at the office, Emma found herself once again sitting alone in her apartment. She stared out the window, the city lights below flickering in the distance. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from David. I need to see you. Can we meet tonight? Emma's heart skipped a beat. She quickly typed back, of course. I'll be there in an hour. As she made her way to the meeting spot, a small cafe just a few blocks from her apartment, her mind raced. What did David want to talk about? Was this about their relationship? Had she said or done something wrong? When she arrived, David was already there, waiting at a small table near the window. He looked up as she entered, a small smile forming on his face. Hey, he greeted her softly, his voice warm but tinged with something else. Emma sat down across from him, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. Hi, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. David studied her for a moment, his eyes searching, before he spoke. I know things have been a little complicated between us lately, he began. I've been thinking about where we are and where we're going. Emma's heart raced. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. I don't want you to feel like you're just a part of my world because of what I can give you, he said, his voice sincere. I want you to know that everything between us, is real. Emma looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. David, she started, but he stopped her with a shake of his head. You don't have to say anything, he said softly. I just needed you to know that I care about you. Not because of anything you've done for me, but because of who you are. Emma's breath caught in her throat. For so long, she had been terrified of not being enough, of not being worthy of the life David was offering her. But in that moment, with his hand holding hers, she realized something. She didn't have to be anything other than herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The weight that had been sitting heavy on her chest for so long began to lift, and she found herself smiling for the first time in a long while. "I care about you too," she said, her voice steady now. David smiled, his eyes lighting up with relief. "Then let's take this one step at a time," he said. And for the first time, Emma felt like she was ready to walk that path with him, wherever it might lead. Weeks passed, and Emma's life seemed to be unfolding in ways she had never imagined. As she continued to thrive at Carter Enterprises, she began to feel more comfortable in her role, but there was still a part of her that felt out of place in the world of business elites. Her relationship with David had deepened, but the doubts that had lingered in her mind for so long didn't completely fade. She still couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking in his world, not hers. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emma sat at her desk, reviewing some reports. She had been working late again, but the quiet of the office allowed her to focus without the distractions of the bustling city outside. Just as she was about to leave, David appeared in her doorway, his expression unreadable. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice serious. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. What was this about? They had talked about their relationship, about where they were heading, but now David seemed distant. She nodded and gestured for him to come in. "Of course," she said softly. David stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He took a deep breath before speaking again. "I've been thinking about everything, about us," he began. "I know things have been moving quickly, but I need to be honest with you about something." Emma's heart raced. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. David met her gaze, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "I care about you, Emma. You know that. But there's something important I haven't told you." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. What could he possibly have to say? "I'm not sure I can continue down this path without being upfront with you," David continued. "I'm not just a CEO. I'm someone who has spent so much of his life focused on work and success that I've missed out on things that matter. And now that I've met you, I realize that I've been trying to control everything, including my feelings." Emma looked at him, her mind racing. What did he mean by all this? Was he saying he didn't want her in his life anymore? David took a step closer to her, his voice softening. "I've been afraid, Emma. Afraid of losing control, afraid of letting someone else in. But when I'm with you, I don't feel that fear. I feel like I can be myself." Emma blinked, her mind trying to catch up with his words. This was not the conversation she had expected. David's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said quietly. "I want us to be together, but I also need to know if you're ready for this. Ready for the kind of life I've been holding on to for so long." Emma felt a rush of emotions, confusion, fear, hope. She had spent so long feeling like she wasn't enough, like she didn't belong in his world. But now, David was offering her something real, something genuine. "David," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know that I want to be with you. I want to see where this can go." David's face broke into a smile, the tension in his body easing. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice full of hope. Emma nodded. "I'm sure." David stepped closer, reaching out to take her hand. "Then let's figure this out together," he said softly. As they stood there, their hands intertwined, Emma realized that this was the beginning of something new. A journey that was theirs to take together, a journey that would be full of challenges, but also full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the weeks went by, Emma and David settled into a routine that felt both comfortable and new. They continued to grow closer, and while their connection deepened, Emma still couldn't quite shake the feeling that her old life, the one she had left behind when she joined Carter Enterprises, was pulling at her. She was no longer just the maid who had helped a homeless man. She had become someone important, someone who was making a real impact. But with that came the constant reminder of her roots, of the life she had once lived. One afternoon, as Emma sat at her desk, reviewing financial reports for an upcoming project, she was interrupted by a knock on the door. She looked up to see David standing in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more serious. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with an unspoken tension. Emma stood up, a slight knot forming in her stomach. Was this another serious conversation? Had something changed between them? Of course, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. David stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. I've been thinking about something, he began. Something that's been on my mind for a while. Emma's heart raced. She could feel the weight of his words, the intensity of the moment hanging between them. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David looked at her with a mixture of concern and determination. I think it's time for you to meet my family, he said. I've told them about you, and they've been asking when they'll get to meet the woman who's changed my life. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Meeting David's family? The thought made her nervous. She had come so far, but now, standing at the edge of this new chapter, she felt unsure. David, I don't know if I'm ready for that, she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't feel like I belong in that world, in your world. I'm just me. I'm not like them. David stepped closer to her, his expression softening. Emma, he said gently, this isn't about fitting in. It's about us. About me showing you how much you mean to me. And if you're ready, I want you to be a part of everything. My world, my family, my future. Emma felt the weight of his words, the sincerity in his voice. She had always doubted herself, always felt like she didn't quite belong. But in that moment, with David standing before her, offering her a chance to step into his life, she realized that maybe it was time to take that leap. Okay, she said, her voice steady now. I'll do it. David smiled, a look of relief washing over his face. You don't have to be anything but yourself, he reassured her. That's all I've ever wanted. As the day of the family meeting approached, Emma's nerves began to build. She spent hours getting ready, choosing an outfit that felt just right, comfortable, yet polished. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to be herself. But as she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection seemed foreign to her. Was she the same girl who had once served soup to a stranger, or had she changed? When the day finally came, David arrived at her apartment, looking dapper in his suit. He greeted her with a smile, his eyes full of warmth. You look perfect, he said, his voice full of admiration. Emma smiled nervously, her heart beating faster. Thank you, she said, her hands trembling slightly. As they drove to his family's estate, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The house was grand, sprawling, and elegant. It felt like a world she had never been a part of, but as David reached over and took her hand, she knew that she was ready to step into this new life. When they arrived, David's family greeted her warmly, and Emma found herself slowly relaxing as the evening went on. They were kind, genuine, and seemed to see her for who she was, not just as David's girlfriend, but as Emma, the woman who had made a difference in his life. As the night drew to a close, David's mother pulled Emma aside, her smile kind and welcoming. David has told us so much about you, she said softly. We're happy to finally meet the woman who's made our son so happy. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she truly belonged. This was her place. This was her new family. And with David by her side, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind for Emma and David. After their meeting with his family, Emma began to feel more integrated into David's world. She had never imagined herself in such an environment, but it wasn't as intimidating as she had thought. David had made sure she felt comfortable, and his family had welcomed her with open arms. They made her feel like she truly belonged, like she was part of something much bigger than herself. Yet, as her new life unfolded, Emma couldn't help but feel a lingering unease. She had always been someone who worked hard for everything she had, and while David had shown her nothing but kindness and patience, a part of her still struggled with the idea of living in such luxury. The grand house, the high-end events, the corporate meetings, it was all so different from the life she had known. One evening, as Emma sat with David on the balcony of their apartment, looking out over the city skyline, the weight of her thoughts seemed to finally break free. David, she said softly, her voice uncertain, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us, about this life we're building together. David turned to her, his expression gentle. What's on your mind? He asked, his voice calm. Emma hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. I'm just not sure if I'm cut out for all of this. The life you've built, the world you're a part of. I feel like I'm always a step behind. Like I'm just pretending to fit in. David reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Emma, you don't have to pretend to fit in, he said, his voice full of reassurance. You don't have to be anyone other than yourself. That's all I've ever wanted from you. Emma looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes making her heart ache. But I've spent so many years trying to prove myself, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Now, with you, I feel like I'm living in a world I don't fully understand. David smiled softly and pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. You're not here because you need to prove anything to me, he said gently. You're here because I believe in you, Emma. I see you for who you are, and that's all that matters. This life, my world, doesn't change who you are. It's just another step in our journey, together. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always feared that she would never truly fit in, that she would always be the outsider in David's world. But in that moment, as she rested in his embrace, she realized that maybe she had it all wrong. Maybe fitting in wasn't about changing who she was. Maybe it was about being accepted for who she already was. As the days passed, Emma began to embrace her new life with a renewed sense of purpose. She took on more responsibilities at Carter Enterprises, and with each passing day, her confidence grew. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of her past seemed to pull her back, but with David's support, she began to see herself in a new light. David was there with her every step of the way, offering guidance, encouragement, and above all, unconditional love. And for the first time in her life, Emma didn't feel like she had to hide. She didn't have to pretend to be someone else to be worthy of love or success. She was enough, just as she was. As they spent more time together, David and Emma's bond grew stronger. They found joy in the little things, shared dinners, quiet walks, late-night talks about their dreams for the future. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were partners, building a life together. One evening, as they sat in the living room, David looked at Emma with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. I think we've come a long way, he said, his voice full of pride. I never imagined I'd find someone who understands me the way you do. Emma smiled back, her eyes full of warmth. I never imagined I'd find someone like you, either, she replied softly. In that moment, Emma realized that her journey wasn't just about finding success or fitting into a new world. It was about finding love, trust, and a place where she truly belonged. And with David by her side, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As time passed, Emma and David grew closer, their lives intertwined in ways neither of them had expected. Their relationship was not without its challenges, but together, they learned to navigate the complexities of both their professional and personal worlds. Emma had found a new sense of purpose in her work, her confidence growing with each new project she took on. Yet, it wasn't just in her career that she was flourishing. Her connection with David had become a source of strength and support. The love they shared was rooted in something deeper than just romance. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared vision for the future. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sunset together, David turned to Emma, his expression serious yet full of affection. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, he said, his voice steady. Emma looked at him, her curiosity piqued. What is it? She asked softly, sensing the weight of the moment. David took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. I've been thinking about how far we've come, he began, and I want to make sure we keep moving forward. Together. Emma's heart skipped a beat, her thoughts racing. What was he saying? David, will you marry me, Emma? He interrupted gently, his words hanging in the air between them. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had always feared that her past would hold her back, that she wouldn't deserve a future like this. But as she looked into David's eyes, she realized that everything had led to this moment. Yes, she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips before she felt the warmth of his embrace. Yes, David, I will marry you. The relief that washed over David was evident as he held her close, his heart filled with a sense of happiness and fulfillment he had never known before. For Emma, the moment was surreal, but it was also the culmination of everything she had hoped for. She had come so far from the uncertain woman she once was, and now, with David by her side, she felt more certain than ever. They spent the rest of the evening talking about their plans, their dreams, and the life they would build together. The idea of marriage no longer seemed like a distant, impossible thing. It felt like a natural next step in their journey. Over the following months, they began to plan their wedding, but Emma's transformation wasn't just about the ceremony or the celebration. It was about the way she had learned to accept herself, to trust in her own worth, and to believe that she was deserving of the love and happiness she had found. As the day of their wedding approached, Emma stood in front of the mirror, her heart racing as she adjusted the delicate lace of her dress. She still couldn't believe how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had gone from serving soup to a stranger to becoming a woman who was about to marry the man she loved, someone who saw her not as a project or a charity case, but as an equal. She smiled to herself, thinking back to the day she had met David. It had been a simple act of kindness, a moment of connection that had turned into something far greater than she could have imagined. And now, standing on the brink of the rest of her life, she knew that the best was yet to come. The wedding ceremony was everything they had dreamed of, simple, intimate, and filled with love. Surrounded by family and friends, Emma and David exchanged vows, promising to support each other through whatever life might bring. As they sealed their promises with a kiss, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude and joy. She had found her place, not just in David's world, but in the world she had built for herself. The life she had once dreamed of was now her reality, and with David by her side, she knew that anything was possible. They left the ceremony hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that as long as they had each other, they would always be enough.